Hello and welcome to WorldCanvass from International Programs at the University of Iowa. I'm Joan Kerr, and we're coming to you from Film Scene in Iowa City. We have a stellar group of guests here tonight to address our topic, which is a tough one, the seemingly intractable cycle of poverty, hunger, and disease. And I say seemingly intractable because lots of creative and dedicated people are working to find solutions for individuals, families, and communities so that tomorrow looks much brighter than today. So thank you for coming. Before we get started, let me remind you that we'd love to have you join us for the live programs if you can. Otherwise, you can catch them later on UITV, YouTube, or iTunes. Information about upcoming shows, as well as links to archived programs, can be found at international.uiowa.edu, and you can learn more at Film Scene at icfilmscene.org. Our guest in his first segment will be addressing the topic of starvation in a world of plenty. And they are International Impact Award winner Roger Thurow, journalist, author, anti-hunger advocate, and a senior fellow for agriculture and food policy at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. And next to him is Judy Polumbaum-professor in the University of Iowa School of Journalism and Mass Communication. Thank you, Judy, for being here.
Thank you.
And at the far end, we have Joanna Krajewski, who's a graduate student in the University of Iowa College of Public Health, and she's also pursuing a PhD in mass communications. Thank you for being here, Joanna.
Thank you.
So, Roger, I'd like to turn first to you, if we may. I've mentioned that you're one of two winners of this year's International Impact Award. You've had a very interesting career.
Thank
and, you know, for a guy who grew up in a small town in Illinois, came here to the University of Iowa. Tell us where you went after that.
Yeah, I've said it before. Thank you. Great to be here, and thanks to the University and International Programs for the award and recognition of that. But yeah, I've often said that I think the University of Iowa, particularly for writers, is a really good place to be because there's kind of this writerly atmosphere here with the journalism school, the Daily Iowan, the Writers' Workshop. But it's also a great place then for these writers to go forth into the world. And so I guess that's what I did. I had an internship with the Wall Street Journal while I was still here, and then right after graduation, I was hired by the Wall Street Journal because back then the Wall Street Journal hired their interns and people out of college, and particularly their interns, if we hadn't like brought the Institute of Paper into disrepute or burned down the building or something, neither of which I did. And so they hired me back, and they said they had a spot for me in the Dallas Bureau. I hadn't been to Dallas, but sounds good. And been to Texas. And then like within 2.5 or 3 years, there was a opening at the Bureau in Bonn, West Germany. There were still two West Germanys then. This is 1982, and I don't know what got into me, but I raised my hand to go there. And lo and behold, it turns out there weren't that many people at the Journal who had raised their hand to do that. So the managing editor called and said, Roger, we'll send you to West Germany. And he said, do you have a passport? And I said, I don't. And he said, first assignment as a foreign correspondent, get a passport. And in my foreign editor, I talked to him, and he said, do you have your shots? And I said, shots for West Germany or for Europe? And he said, yeah, but we don't know where we might send you once you're overseas. Then I started getting a little woozy about that because I was figuring, what's that about? What am I getting myself into? And really kind of an accidental foreign correspondent, because when I was here at the Daily Iowan, had been the sports editor for a year and city editor for a year, and wrote for the paper for all 4 years that I was here. I guess my ambition would have been to be a sports writer for kind of a large paper somewhere in the Midwest, and particularly the Central Time Zone, because I would get kind of nervous and kind of discombobulated being in a different time zone and figuring how do they kind of exist an hour before, an hour after. And so to kind of then find myself in an international setting, and then that went on for 20 years as a foreign correspondent, and one place led to another, and they were all fascinating experiences. And yeah, so it was, I couldn't imagine my career taking that direction when I was here.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned Germany, and you were there when the Berlin Wall fell? You reported on that, or around that time?
Yep, so I was in West Germany from 1982 to 86, kind of the height of the Cold War tensions. So that was fascinating to report on that. And then I think kind of the classes that I took in international relations and politics here probably helped inform me or prepare me for that to some extent. But in 1986, had the opportunity to open a Wall Street Journal's office in Johannesburg, South Africa. It was becoming a particularly big story for the Wall Street Journal, because at that stage in 1986, the sanctions to disinvestment were really picking up steam, certainly at all the universities, and it would have been true here as well, the pressure to disinvest from many activities that you had there, the corporate boardrooms, the people that read the Wall Street Journal, the major advertisers and things, they were all besieged to get out of South Africa, to the economic sanctions on them. So I opened the bureau there, and then kind of in 1989, I was in Namibia, next door to South Africa, Southwest Africa at the time, because they were getting their independence and kind of their separation from the control of the apartheid state in South Africa. They were UN protectorate, and kind of all the other foreign correspondents in Johannesburg were there, kind of right about the beginning of the independence movement there, the process. And was listening to the BBC, and Voice of America, and was hearing the news out of East Germany. The government of Erich Honecker had fallen. A new government that had come in seemed equally repressive and unmoving by the protests that were going on. And my foreign editor called me and reached me kind of at the northernmost part in Namibia, where they still had telephone, landline connections. And he said, have you heard about what's going on there? And I said, I have. How serious is it? And he said, we don't know what the outcome's going to be, but yeah, it seems that there's major change and tumult happening, and so how they wanted as many German speakers in back there, and how many and people who had experience in Germany. And so I said, it'll take us 2 days to get there, to get down to Windhoek, the capital of Namibia, over to Johannesburg, get winter clothes, and then go back up in November. And I think, if I had the timing right, my wife and I, we were flying up there. My wife's a French and German translator, so they said, Anne can come as well, because we'll be sending other correspondents there who won't know their way around. And so I think as we were flying there in the night, and I think it was a Thursday, November 9th, the wall fell. And so then we arrived the next day in Frankfurt, made our way to the border. And so it was there for the first weekend and the first days of reunifications. The East Germans were streaming across whatever breaches there were in the Berlin Wall, in the rest of the Iron Curtain, coming over in their little Trabant cars, kind of two-stroke engines, and they were sleeping in them, and they had no heat. And so the West Germans were saying, here, come to the gymnasiums and the bomb shelters that we prepared that we don't need anymore, because it seems the Cold War is over. And so kind of this fascinating mixture. So it was there kind of for the whole, the initial part of the end of communism in Eastern Europe, and the reunification of Germany. Stayed there for about a month. Other things were going on in Germany as a result of that. And then went back to South Africa and Johannesburg. And there then the rumors were heavy in a Johannesburg Stock Exchange and elsewhere that Mandela might be released. And the government had already released some of his compatriots and colleagues who had been sentenced with him in the Rivonia treason trial. And it's kind of a test run. And then it was on, I think, February 2nd, kind of a bolt out of the clear blue Cape Town sky at the opening of Parliament, where F.W. de Klerk stood up and said, I'm unbanning the ANC and the South African Communist Party, and I will soon be releasing Nelson Mandela. And then February 11th, I think it was February 11th, Mandela walked out of prison in Cape Town. So if you think back to that time, within a span of, I think, 3 months or 90 days, the two things that a lot of us here would have figured will never happen in our lifetimes happened. Fall of the Berlin Wall, release of Mandela, end of communism in Eastern Europe, essentially the end of apartheid in South Africa. So it was a fascinating period.
Yeah, and you were there for both of these. I mean,
yes.
Did you have to pinch yourself that you were in these places at these times?
I do, and I think particularly as time goes on, and as was referred to, this is the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and kind of reading the coverage of that and thinking back to that time. And, you know, I guess it was this time of uncertainty, what's happening. I think as we were talking about earlier, that then somebody was writing that it's the end of history. What else could happen with such a big bang thing? As we know, certainly history goes on. Every day history is being made. And so it's when you look back on that, it was an extraordinary period.
Well, tonight, one of the things we're focusing on is this whole terrible cycle. We've been calling it a cycle of poverty, hunger, disease. And as I understand it, when you were reporting much of this time in Africa, one of the things that could sort of never leave you was what you saw before you, starvation among people who were actually producing food.
Exactly. And so it was kind of in 2002, 2003, so the beginning of the new millennium, of the 21st century. Was based in Zurich, in Switzerland, for the Wall Street Journal. Not covering the banks or economics stories, which would have been kind of beyond my comprehension to understand those machinations. We had other people in Europe that were doing that. But I was writing about humanitarian and development issues, and increasingly write about kind of the impact of American policies on people in the rest of the world, particularly in the developing world. Was writing about the impact of the Farm Bill on smallholder farmers, our food aid and how that was impacting people. And then the Ethiopian famine of 2003 hit. 14 million people were on the doorstep of starvation, being fed by the international community and food aid. And it was 19 years after the 1984 famine where we kind of all stood in horror and were saying never again, and we are the world, and do they know it's Christmas, and all that whole event that came to raise awareness. 19 years later, it was happening again. And it was there covering that story, and somebody from the World Food Program who's kind of briefing me on, here's what we're going to see when we go to the famine zones and travel to them in Ethiopia. He said, Roger, it was kind of a piece of advice, but a warning, but it kind of sounded ominously to a warning to me, that looking into the eyes of someone dying of hunger becomes a disease of the soul. What you see is that nobody should have to die of hunger, particularly in the 21st century. The next day was down in the hunger zones in an emergency feeding tent, and there for the first time as a foreign correspondent, I felt ashamed, particularly the time that I had been in Africa. I hadn't really focused on the hunger issue. And I there did indeed, for the first time, look into the eyes of the hungry. Certainly became a disease of the soul, and it was kind of a moment that, it was a story that stopped me. And as a foreign correspondent, we're always going from country to country and place to place and story to story. That one, it was the story that I have to come back to, and come back to, and come back to. Hunger in the 21st century. What kind of madness were we, our behavior in the world? And so that then kind of became this catalyzing moment, I guess, in my life and in my career. And that became the focus of my journalism, the passion of my journalism. That then led me to write the books, to eventually leave the Wall Street Journal, to continue to write solely on this issue. So I think I was trying the patience of my editors at the Wall Street Journal at one stage. They said, you got to write more than just about the hunger issue. I said, yes, I understand it, but this is what I want to write about. You already written about that. Well, they're still hungry. We have to keep writing about these things. And so then it was, okay, if I want to write about this and focus my efforts on that, and my journalism, my storytelling, it was time to leave the paper and then concentrate on writing the books.
Well, we'll have a chance, those who can stay this evening will have a chance to see The Last Hunger Season, which is an interesting project you've been working on, and your book as well, same name. We'll have copies here in the theater if anybody would like to pick one up. But I think we'll turn to Judy now just for a second and talk about this interesting situation a journalist finds himself or herself in, where you try to present a clear-eyed report about what you see, get all the facts down as accurately as possible. But as Roger said, there are some things that just don't leave you. You are personally impacted because, after all, you're an individual and a human being with your own mind as well. You teach journalism students every day, and you've been a journalist. So what have you seen over your lifetime? How is this absorbed by different people that you've worked with as a journalism professor?
Well, let me say first that I'm here on this panel not because of anything I know or anything I've done. I'm here except for one thing, which was nominate Roger Thurow for this award.
Yeah.
But I think Roger is, he really exemplifies the expertise of a professional journalist who is pursuing his passion through information, through research, through interviews, through very deep reporting. And so while we like to say emotions shouldn't get in the way of our judgments, he is justifying his judgments with the breadth and depth of information gathering that he does. In journalism generally, hard news reporting in particular, there's a kind of fiction that there's no journalist there. There's no person there. The stories are just produced objectively with dispassion. And of course, that's impossible. But in our training, in our socialization, we try to maintain this fiction. And I think the honest thing to do is to really confront the fact that you have values, you have positions on things, and that your job as a journalist is to muster the very best information you can to convey major issues, major problems, important stories. And Roger really exemplifies that. And one more thing I want to say about his work. There are different models of bringing global attention to global problems. And journalism has a big role to play. But one model is the kind of celebrity journalism model where the journalist, the investigator, becomes the white knight riding off into the sunset with the solutions. Another model is the people who are affected by the problems are the main subjects, and their story is most important. And whenever possible, the journalist, the reporter, should get out of the way. And I think Roger does that spectacularly well. He's very modest, very humble about his work, but the results are really powerful and compelling. And I'll just do a little ad for his books. This one is enough. It came out in 2009. Co-authored with a fellow Wall Street Journal reporter, Scott Kilman.
And UI alum, Scott.
And UI alum.
Wall Street J School.
And this one, which I just got, this one's already autographed by Roger. This one I'm going to have him autograph right now. The Last Hunger Season, about smallholder farmers. And so, it's always a thrill when Roger returns to the University of Iowa campus because he's such an inspiration for those among our journalism students who really want to do public service journalism.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That maybe leads us to Joanna Krajewski, because Joanna, I've invited you to be on this panel as well. You're a young, you're a student here at the University of Iowa, just beginning your career, but you have a master's, I believe, in public health, and you're also getting a PhD in mass communications. So tell me how you want to use communications to amplify your work in public health.
Well, I would have to credit my first trip to India and the communication director at the College of Public Health for asking me to do a blog. And it was through that then a professor for that India Winterim course asked me to make a video about the Siegel Foundation. And from there, I just realized the value that maybe we need more of in translating the research that's done into some sort of activism. And so I think that connection between communicating these great projects in public health, global public health, is really important.
I know that you produced a video related to the water crisis in India that you had studied. Tell us a little bit about what that was all about.
Well, I was asked to do that through a documentary, and then it turned out to be kind of a web portal called waterpressures.org. And they were interested in the way that new media technologies can enable students to be able to blog or create videos so easily. And so I made this video just using my iPhone and the most basic video editing and pictures that you can have on any Mac computer. And then they used that as part of their website and as part of this model that students who do international work or study abroad projects can follow and thus communicate their research.
Well, I know that we'll be talking a little bit later about water resource issues, again with the representative from the Siegel Foundation, Jay Siegel. But you have worked in Haiti, and you wrote me something that I think is just astonishing. You said that more people in the developing world have access to mobile phones than safe drinking water. And this is an astonishing thought.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that I can use that as part of my dissertation work in this program.
In regard to your to what you've learned with smallholder farmers in Africa, are water resource issues problematic for African farmers as well as perhaps these areas of India and other parts of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of more people have access to mobile phones than to safe drinking water, more access to mobile phones than toilets, also particularly in India. More access to mobile phones than the essential elements of agriculture. For the smallholder farmers, the access to better quality seeds, microdosing levels of fertilizer, agricultural extension advice, financing. Kind of it's a negligence that these issues, that we've allowed this to persevere and to continue, and that, again, when we think, gee, we're in the second decade of the 21st century and we still have these kind of medieval conditions almost, it's like what's going on? But yeah, water, critical for agriculture. And then so the next book, the current book that I'm working on is on 1,000 days from the time a woman becomes pregnant to the second birthday of the child. Nutrition really important in that span, but also the safe drinking water, the wash issues, the water sanitation, hygiene, incredibly important so that the moms are able to remain healthy. The babies also have a safe, clean environment where they're growing up in, and to keep kind of the parasites and worms and things out of their body, because they consume the nutrients that are supposed to help the body. And so the clean water and water issues are incredibly important for the health of the individuals, but for the health of the entire world.
Well, and just in this last minute or so that we have, there are some success stories, aren't there? Smallholder farmers who have been able to band together with the help of foundations, with the work you're doing with your NGO, to understand how markets work a little bit better, provide ways to store their produce for a better market price, and so on and so forth. Are these big strides? Do you see these as making a real difference in the countries you're working in?
Yeah, they're big strides, particularly in the context of as the farmers themselves are working. I think it's one of the cruelest ironies of Africa, and maybe perhaps one of the cruelest ironies of the world, is that the hungriest people in the world are smallholder farmers. It's a horrible, hideous, ugly, obscene, stupid oxymoron. The same as kind of hunger in America and food insecurity here. Hungry Americans is a horrible oxymoron. Hungry farmers. And so, I mean, as Judy was saying, in my reporting, to amplify focus on the voices of the farmers themselves and their lives, and have them tell the story themselves. And through that, to hopefully, kind of my mantra of my journalism would maybe be kind of outrage and inspire. Because you want to outrage people. Here's the situation, kind of grab them by the collar by the storytelling, but in the inspiration that there is progress being made. These are problems that can be solved, particularly the problem of global hunger. We know how to do that, particularly in this state. It's the breadbasket of the U.S., breadbasket of the world. Grow food better than anywhere else. We can do this, and it's just, you know, to focus on that, to make the political commitments of that, the social commitments, and to say, yeah, we need to get going on this and actually change things and change the state of the world, and the better for everybody, because the better that these smallholder farmers, the more that they succeed in conquering their own hunger seasons and feeding their families, the more that we all succeed in this great goal of the future of how are we going to continue to feed the growing population, the population that's ever more prosperous, eating different kinds of food, more food. So these steps, whether small, large in the context of the farmers themselves, are incredibly important, and those stories need to be told as well.
Wow. Well, I hope that you have a chance to read The Last Hunger Season, and I want to give a deep thanks here to Roger Thurow, just next to me, and to Judy Polumbaum, and to Joanna Krajewski for joining us for this first segment in this program tonight. Very grateful to have you here, and we hope you'll join us for part 2 of this series, when we'll talk with Dr. Selma Geronimo, also a winner of the 2014 International Impact Award, and with Dr. Mary Wilson about their research into endemic tropical diseases and efforts to eradicate them. All WorldCanvass programming is available on YouTube, iTunes, UITV, and the International Programs website, which is international.uiowa.edu. And to learn more about Film Scene, visit icfilmscene.org. I'm Joan Kerr for UI International Programs. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. That was smooth.